I used to believe that if I loved my family enough, they'd change. But on my 29th birthday, just as I placed the cake on the table, silently hoping for a hug, my father looked me dead in the eye and said, "This house isn't yours. If you don't like it, leave." No one defended me. No one even asked if I was okay. What they didn't know was that I didn't walk away empty-handed. I took the one thing that could bring their entire world down the final key, to every account they depended on for 4 years. If you think this is just another typical family drama, you're wrong. Subscribe now so you won't miss the next shocking chapters we're about to reveal. I had lit the candles myself, 29 of them, on a small white cake I bought during my lunch break. Nothing fancy. A grocery store vanilla sheet cake with a shaky happy birthday. Emily written in pink icing. My name, my celebration, my money. Like everything else in this house. The dining table had been set, even if half-heartedly. 3 chipped plates, paper napkins folded into triangles, and plastic cutlery. The chairs were still warm from where I had scrubbed them minutes earlier. I'd cleaned the kitchen, took the trash out, and even ran a load of laundry before dinner, none of which was acknowledged. And why would it be? That had become the rhythm of my life, invisible labor with a visible cost. The living room TV blared in the background, some rerun of an old crime show Dad liked, volume turned up too loud as always. Mom sat on the far end of the couch, her phone in hand, endlessly scrolling through a Facebook feed she barely interacted with. My younger brother Tyler, 22, and recently between passions, lounged with a controller in hand, thumbs twitching as he shot Digital Zombie's earbuds in and consciousness far removed. I cleared my throat softly. No one looked up. "Dinner's ready," I said louder, forcing cheer into my voice. Mom stirred slightly. "Just give me a minute, sweetheart." Dad grunted but didn't move. "Tyler," I called. He raised one hand in a lazy thumbs-up, eyes still glued to the screen. I stood there for a beat longer, hand resting on the back of my chair, heart thudding in a way I couldn't name. I'd bought steaks a treat, grilled them myself medium rare just like Dad liked, even made roasted garlic mashed potatoes and sautéed green beans. Simple things. Nothing extravagant but special enough for a birthday. My birthday, and yet I felt like an uninvited guest in my own celebration. Eventually they wandered in one after another like patrons at a mediocre diner. Dad first muttering about the game's score. Tyler still wearing one AirPod chewing gum like it was his job. Mom was the last offering me a distracted smile before reaching for a plate. "Smells nice," she said automatically. I smiled back, unsure whether it reached my eyes. "Thanks. I thought it'd be nice to have dinner together. You know, since it's my birthday." Tyler blinked. "Oh, right. Happy birthday, Em." I nodded. "Thanks." Dad said nothing. We ate in near silence. The scrape of utensils on ceramic, the clink of Dad's whiskey glass. Occasionally Tyler's phone buzzed and he grinned at something on the screen. Mom asked if I'd seen the new picture Aunt Kelly posted of her dog wearing a sweater. I hadn't. No one asked about my job. No one asked how I felt turning 29. No one noticed I looked tired or that I'd been working 10-hour days for weeks, trying to balance code reviews, system migration, and back-to-back product deadlines while managing 3 other adults' bills on a single income. Then, like a lightning bolt through a dry forest, Dad set his fork down with a loud clack. "You know," he said, voice low but loaded, "you act like we owe you something." I paused fork midair. What? "You heard me," he said. Now looking directly at me, eyes narrowed, chin tilted in that way I'd come to associate with incoming verbal grenades. All these little shows, the dinner, the candles, like you're waiting for applause. I blinked. "It's my birthday. And you think that means you get to play the martyr?" His words hit me like cold water. I looked to Mom. Her eyes dropped instantly. To Tyler, who suddenly found his mashed potatoes fascinating. "Dad, I'm not playing anything," I said softly, trying not to let the tremor in my voice rise. I just thought we could have dinner. Together. Dad let out a bitter chuckle. Yeah, on your terms. Your money, your rules. You think this house is yours just because you throw a few dollars around? My jaw clenched. A few dollars? Don't start, he snapped. You want to go live your independent little life, fine. No one's stopping you. You're kidding, I said, the heat finally rising. I pay the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries. I even paid your dental bill last month because your insurance lapsed and you didn't tell me until the collection agency called. I'm not asking for a parade, Dad. I'm asking for basic respect. His chair scraped back violently against the hardwood as he stood. If you don't like it here, he said, voice hard, now low and dangerous, you can leave. No one begged you to stay. You think you're so high and mighty because you got a fancy job in tech. This is my house. Always has been. Silence. A long, suffocating, thick silence. I could hear my own heartbeat. I could feel the sting behind my eyes, the pressure building in my chest. Mom shifted uncomfortably. Robert, maybe this isn't the... No, he snapped. She needs to hear it. Acting like she owns the place, like she's some kind of savior. Always looking down on the rest of us. Tyler finally spoke, voice barely a mutter. Kinda is her money, though. Dad whipped his head toward him. Excuse me, Tyler shrugged, not lifting his head. She pays for everything. Dad turned back to me. So that's what this is. You've got your little audience now. Your pity party. I stood slowly. My hands trembled, but I kept them flat on the table. I didn't do any of this for recognition. I said each word deliberate. I did it because I thought we were a family. Because I thought helping each other is what families do. Dad snorted. Yeah, as long as you're in charge, huh? I looked him dead in the eye. You told me to leave, so I will. Mom gasped softly. Emily, I turned to her. You sat there and said nothing. Her lips parted, but no sound came. I looked around the table. The food cooling. The wax from the candles dripping down to the plate. The smell of grilled meat now tinged with something burnt. I'd tried so hard. And it still wasn't enough. I'll go, I repeated, but I'm not going empty-handed. And with that, I blew out the candles. No one sang. No one clapped. No one stopped me as I walked out of the room, each footstep echoing louder than the last. It was the quietest birthday I ever had, and the beginning of everything changing. 4 years ago, I got the call that was supposed to change everything. Emily, we'd love to bring you on as our senior back-end engineer, the recruiter said, her voice cheerful, nearly glowing through the phone. You'll be leading architecture for our product scale-out. The offer's at $130,000 with equity. It felt like a victory lap I hadn't expected to win so soon. I'd done everything right, top of my class in computer science, 2 internships, a grueling interview process, and now finally I had something real. Solid. Life-changing. I remember hanging up and running out into the hallway of our small 2-bedroom rental apartment. At the time, I was still living at home, saving money before moving out to my own place. Dad, Mom, I called. I got it. They made the offer. Mom came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, eyes wide. You got the job? Dad looked up from the couch, the one with the stock options. I nodded, practically shaking with joy. It's everything. The whole package. For one moment, one rare, crystallized moment, their faces lit up. Mom wrapped me in a hug that smelled like dish soap and flour. Dad gave me a proud slap on the back, and Tyler shouted woo-hoo from his bedroom. I thought we'd turned a corner that day, but exactly 3 weeks later the call came for Dad. Only this time it wasn't good news. They cut the whole division, he said quietly, standing in the doorway of the kitchen while I loaded the dishwasher. 26 years with that company. Gone in an email. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just stared past me hollow, like someone had pulled the floor out from under his life. At first we were all sympathetic, supportive. I told him I could help out with rent until he got something new. Mom made his favorite meals. Tyler even offered to show him how to use LinkedIn. But the job search went nowhere. Dad would apply to one or two things, then spend hours dissecting every rejection like a personal vendetta. They want kids now, he'd grumble. Fresh out of college. No experience, but they'll work for peanuts. Dad, you've got value, I told him more than once. You have experience, they don't. He never looked me in the eye when I said that. Doesn't matter. I'm done. Then Mom's episodes started. They weren't diagnosed exactly. Just moments where she'd clutch her chest, say she felt dizzy, sit down and whisper that her heart wasn't right. I think I need to reduce my hours, she told me one evening as I was sending in the last of my onboarding paperwork. Have you seen a cardiologist? I asked. She waved me off. It's stress. Your father losing his job, the mortgage. I just can't do full days anymore. Tyler, still in community college back then, dropped out within the month. It's not for me, he said. I don't know why I'm wasting time learning calculus when I could be creating something real. What does that mean? Streaming, he answered. I want to build my platform. And just like that, I became the only one working, the only one paying. It started small groceries, the power bill, the internet, then the mortgage, then car insurance, then both car payments. I'll pay you back, Tyler said when I covered his dental bill. As soon as I get my subscriber count up. Just until I get back on my feet, Dad would say when he asked me to cover another month of his truck note. This is only temporary, Mom would whisper when I Venmo'd her the money for her prescription. At first I believed them. I told myself it was family. I told myself it was love. I didn't notice the shift at first, how help turned into expectation. How the thank yous stopped. How the conversations became more about what I hadn't paid yet than what I already had. The house became quieter during the day. Dad fell into a routine of watching daytime TV and napping. Tyler spent every waking hour in his room gaming into the night. Mom rotated between doctor's appointments and reruns. I began working longer hours, not just because of deadlines, but because the office felt more like home than home did. When my first bonus hit, I used it to pay off 2 months of late property tax that Dad had ignored. When my company offered to sponsor a tech conference trip to San Diego, I declined. Mom had hinted that the water heater was making a strange noise and I couldn't risk them being cold. I told myself it was just a phase, that I was being generous, that it was temporary, but by year 2 I started keeping track. Not to hold it against them, but to stay sane. $900 monthly for the mortgage, $800 for 2 car payments, $350 insurance, $150 for groceries, $100 for Wi-Fi, $70 for phone plans, $40 for streaming, plus the surprise expenses, medical bills, repair costs, last-minute emergencies. Every month, nearly $5,000 vanished from my account before I even saw it. I created a spreadsheet labeled Family Support, FY1. It had columns for each person, each expense, notes on the due date, tags for critical, avoidable, and surprise. I color-coded it in red, yellow, and gray. By year 3, I had an entire tab for recurring late payments and overdraft protection transfers I'd made from my own savings to keep their accounts afloat. I didn't even notice my own life shrinking. I stopped buying new clothes. I gave up on saving for a down payment. I ate peanut butter sandwiches while Dad asked for imported coffee. I used a cracked phone while Tyler had the newest gaming headset. Still, I told myself this was love. This was sacrifice. This was what good daughters did. I kept showing up, paying, cleaning, worrying, even as they stopped asking. Because they didn't need to anymore. It had become assumed, expected. I started to dread holidays, birthdays, any moment where a gift or celebration might come and go unnoticed. The pressure to smile, to fund joy I didn't get to feel. Every once in a while someone would say, "You're such a good daughter," and I'd nod, smile, swallow the truth. But the truth was I didn't feel good. I felt tired. I felt used. And slowly I started to understand. Good daughters don't give until they have nothing left. They don't finance other people's comfort at the expense of their own peace. They don't light themselves on fire just to keep everyone else warm. But it would take me another year and a birthday dinner I'd never forget to finally do something about it. The first time I truly noticed the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was a Wednesday evening. I had just come home after a 14-hour shift that ended with 2 critical bugs, 1 panicked product manager, and an engineer quitting mid-sprint. My head was pounding, my neck stiff, and my inbox had exploded. I opened the door to the house I paid for and stepped into chaos I hadn't created. The living room looked like a teenage gaming den. Tyler's shoes flung by the door, pizza boxes stacked like a shrine to laziness, and 3 Red Bull cans balanced precariously on the arm of the couch where he sat screaming into his headset. "Bro, I told you to flank." "No, I'm not reviving you again. That's your third Jesus, dude." He didn't even glance my way. In the kitchen, the sink was full. Grease-caked plates, a pan with some congealed meat residue, and a smoothie blender still plugged in and oozing something green down the side. "Hey," I called. "Could someone do the dishes? It's been 3 days." No response. I walked into the kitchen, dropped my bag, and started clearing space on the counter, biting the inside of my cheek. Mom shuffled in a minute later, dramatically holding her lower back with both hands like she was auditioning for a soap opera. "I was going to get to those," she said, eyes scanning the mess as if it had surprised her. I turned to her, still holding a stained glass. "I asked Tyler to do them yesterday. And the day before." She sighed. "He's been so busy with his stream." "Busy?" I blinked. "He's playing Call of Duty 8 hours a day and living off my credit card." Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "You know he's trying to build something." I dropped the glass into the sink too hard. "So am I, Mom." She looked at me, then really looked. But not with concern or shame. With something worse, weariness. As if my frustration was an inconvenience she didn't have the energy to entertain. "You've been tense lately," she said carefully. "Work getting to you?" "No," I said. "This house is getting to me." She flinched like I'd slapped her. I regretted the words immediately, but didn't take them back. That night, over a dinner I hadn't agreed to make but found myself cooking anyway, I decided to speak up. For real this time. Dad sat across the table, chewing without tasting, eyes occasionally darting to the muted TV mounted above the fridge. Mom nursed a half cup of tea and stared at the wall. Tyler wasn't even present. "I need to talk to you both," I began. That got their attention. Dad looked at me with mild annoyance. Mom put down her cup. I took a breath. I can't keep doing this alone. Silence. "I'm covering everything, rent bills, groceries, even random crap like dog food for a dog we don't have anymore. It's not sustainable." Dad scoffed. "You're making 6 figures. And you're what, 28? That's more than I ever made in my prime." "Exactly," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "And it's supposed to be my prime, too." Mom frowned. "Sweetheart, no one's forcing you. But you're not stopping either," I replied. "Every month there's something new. Repairs, late fees. Tyler's gaming subscription. He's pursuing a career Dad balked. A career that hasn't made a single dollar," I snapped. "And your mother has health issues," he added. Mom placed a hand on her chest. "I've had palpitations again. It's probably the stress of all this tension." I laughed and it came out dry and bitter. "You're stressed because I'm asking for help." Dad leaned forward, jaw tight. "If you're trying to say we're a burden..." I didn't say that, I interrupted. "I'm saying I need support. A conversation. A plan. Something." "You're lucky," he growled. "You didn't grow up the way I did. You have opportunities. You're supposed to help family." "I am helping," I said, rising from my chair. "But it feels less like help and more like obligation. Like I'm some kind of ATM with feelings nobody bothers to check on." Mom whispered, "Don't be so dramatic." There it was, the line they always fell back on. Dramatic, ungrateful, spoiled. I'd heard them all before, but that night something cracked. Maybe it was the way Dad rolled his eyes, or the way Mom sighed like I'd dropped an empty cup instead of my soul. Or maybe it was just exhaustion, years of swallowed words finally pushing their way out. "Why don't you both consider part-time work?" I asked. "Dad, you could consult. Mom, the library's hiring clerks." Dad's face went red. "You want me to go work at a library now? What's next? Flipping burgers?" "You're not working at all," I said. "And I'm drowning here." His voice dropped low, dangerous. "We're your family. You think you're better than us now?" And there it was again. The guilt card, played with precision. "No," I said. "I just want some respect." Maybe a thank you now and then. Maybe a day where I don't have to choose between paying your overdue car note or buying myself a decent pair of shoes. We didn't ask for this, Mom said. You didn't refuse it either, I replied. Dad pushed his chair back and stood. I've had enough of this tone. I've had enough of this life, I said quietly. He froze mid-turn. You know, he said over his shoulder, for someone who got handed everything, you sure act like you earned it. It took all my strength not to scream. That night in the dark, lying on a mattress I'd bought for everyone but me, I opened my budget spreadsheet again. $900, $800, $350, $150, $70, $40, and climbing. I scrolled down to the bottom where a single red cell blinked like a warning flare. Emily. Remaining discretionary funds. $186.45. That was what I had left for the month. For food, transport, toiletries, emergencies. After carrying the lives of 3 adults who barely remembered to say good morning, I stared at that number for a long time. And for the first time in 4 years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt awake, because I finally understood what I was to them. Not a daughter, not a sister, not a person with limits and dreams and fatigue. I was a resource, a lifeline, a wallet with Wi-Fi. And sooner or later, if I didn't change something, they were going to drain me dry. The hallway smelled faintly of burned popcorn and something sweet, maybe cinnamon. The kind of artificial sweetness that comes from store-bought candles meant to disguise rot. I'd just gotten back from the office after another soul-wringing day of navigating microaggressions in the boardroom, a broken CI pipeline, and another junior dev who couldn't merge code without nuking production. I was running on black coffee and sarcasm, wearing the same wrinkled slacks from Monday, and holding a tote bag with groceries I didn't have time to shop for but did anyway, because no one else would. As I rounded the corner into the living room, the sound of machine gun fire and shouted slurs echoed through the house. Tyler, there he was. My 22-year-old brother. Reclined on the new gaming chair, he begged for last Christmas headset on barking orders into his mic. His fingers danced across the keyboard of a $2,300 gaming laptop that I had co-signed for after he swore it was essential to building his brand. Bro, don't peek the angle. Are you brain dead? He screamed. Eyes locked on the screen. Jesus. Mute, mute, mute. He slammed a key, leaned back, and finally noticed me. What he asked like I was interrupting. I stared at him. At the neon glow from his LED keyboard lighting up his face. At the empty Gatorade bottles scattered around his feet. At the greasy pizza box on the couch next to him. At the wireless router reset button I'd taped down because he'd rage-kicked it last week when his game lagged. Did you clean the kitchen? I asked. No time, he said, tugging his headset back on. Tournament starts in 10. I waited. He didn't flinch. You've been home all day, I said, slowly clutching the grocery bag tighter. You can't take 15 minutes to do the dishes. He lowered the headset slightly like I was being unreasonable. I'm grinding. You think it's easy trying to go pro? I exhaled hard through my nose. Going pro at what, Tyler? I've paid for 3 months of streaming software, 2 new mics, and your damn Twitch overlays, and I haven't seen you land a sponsorship, $1, or even a plan. He stood up then, offense flaring across his face like I'd insulted a sacred tradition. I'm building something, Emily. Just because you're a tech drone doesn't mean the rest of us want to rot in a cubicle. I opened my mouth, then shut it. There was no point. From behind me, I heard the unmistakable sound of fingers tapping against glass. I turned. Mom sat on the dining room bench, her glasses pushed to the tip of her nose, fully immersed in her iPad. Her credit card lay beside her, half slid out of its floral holder. On screen, I saw a checkout window, $386.72 at a luxury skincare site. A new order confirmed. Did you just place an order? I asked. She blinked up at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. I needed serum, she said. My dermatologist says. You don't have a dermatologist, I cut in. She pursed her lips. Online recommendations are valid too. You wouldn't understand, your skin's young. I walked toward her slowly, carefully, like approaching a sleeping dog. Mom, I said, calm, deliberate. We are behind on utilities. I had to cover your phone bill again this week. And you just spent almost $400 on skincare." She looked away. "I haven't bought anything for myself in months." "That's not true," I replied. "Last week you got those Italian sandals. And before that, the faux mink throw from Pottery Barn." Tyler scoffed from the living room. "Why are you always tracking what everyone buys, kinda psycho?" I turned my voice sharper than I intended, because I'm the one paying for all of it. They both fell silent, and in that silence something snapped. Not with a bang, but a quiet, irrevocable crack, like the first fracture in glass before it spiderwebs. "You think you're better than us?" Mom said finally, her voice soft but sharp. "No," I said. "I think I'm exhausted." I didn't wait for a reply. I walked straight to my room, closed the door behind me, and slid the lock shut. My hands were shaking. I set the grocery bag down on my desk, then dropped into my chair and opened my laptop. I typed in my bank password, fingers trembling with habit, now always checking, always calculating, always bracing. My main checking account, $842.13. Savings, $5,052.78. Total liquid assets, $5,894.91. I stared at the numbers. Numbers that should have been triple, quadruple. For someone with my salary, my hours, my responsibilities. But each month, the money bled out like water through a cracked dam. I opened the spreadsheet I hadn't shown anyone. Family expenses ongoing. Rows upon rows, mortgage car notes, groceries, streaming services, medical bills, Amazon orders, unplanned vet visits for the cat that Mom said followed her home Uber rides Tyler never reimbursed. Each cell meticulously labeled, color-coded in hues of green, yellow, and panic red. There was a line at the bottom. Remaining disposable income after family obligations, $187.42. I stared at that number until it blurred. The air in my room felt stale, stifling, like I was choking on my own generosity. I minimized the spreadsheet, opened a new document, typed. "Am I being used by my family?" Then deleted it, then typed again. "Signs your family is financially dependent on you." My screen filled with articles, blog posts, therapist essays, stories from anonymous women just like me. Words like financial abuse, guilt-shaming, and covert manipulation leapt off the page. I didn't want it to be true. I wanted to believe I was helping, that I was holding us all together. But all I could see was Tyler playing games on a laptop I couldn't afford for myself, and Mom buying $80 moisturizer while I rationed coffee pods to stretch through the week. I closed the browser, sat back in my chair. The room was too quiet now. Not peaceful. Hollow. Like everything I'd built, everything I'd earned had become the currency they used to keep me here. Not with chains, but with need, with the illusion of helplessness, with soft guilt and sharper silence, with the kind of expectations that look like love until you start doing the math. And for the first time in 4 years, I allowed the thought to land. What if I just stopped? Stopped paying, stopped fixing, stopped being their fallback plan. The thought scared me. But it didn't feel wrong. It felt cold, and sometimes cold is clarity. The call wasn't planned. I didn't even know if her number still worked. I hadn't spoken to Lena Jameson in nearly 2 years, not since the wedding I bailed on at the last minute, because Tyler crashed my car and I had to cover the deductible. But that night, sitting cross-legged on my bedroom floor, the numbers in my savings account echoing like an alarm bell in my ears, I scrolled through my contacts until I found her name. Lena Berkeley. Firewalls plus whiskey. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered for a second too long. Then I tapped. The phone rang twice. "Emily freaking Carter," a familiar voice answered. "Is this real life?" A breath left me I didn't realize I was holding. "Hey," I said, my voice smaller than I expected. There was a pause. Then she dropped the sass. "What's wrong?" Everything I wanted to say. The air, the house, my bank account, my pride. Instead, "Do you have time to talk?" "Absolutely. Give me 5 minutes, just got home from work. I'll FaceTime you." When her face appeared on the screen, it was like time hadn't passed. Same dark curls tucked under a messy bun, same smart-ass sparkle behind her glasses. Except the background was new, A clean, minimalist apartment with actual sunlight, everything mine wasn't. "You look like hell," she said bluntly. "Start talking." I laughed and it cracked. "I think I'm being financially held hostage." Her face shifted. "By who?" "My family." And just like that, the floodgates opened. I told her everything rapid fire. The mortgage, the cars, the guilt, the birthday dinner, the spreadsheet, the skincare order, the emotional sleight of hand I'd been blind to for years. She didn't interrupt, didn't blink, just listened the way only a best friend with a decade of context can. When I finally stopped to breathe, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Jesus." I wiped my face. "You still there?" "Oh yeah," she said. "I'm just running through worst-case firewall protocols in my head, because what you're describing isn't support. It's sustained exploitation wrapped in family-first packaging. That's what I'm afraid of," I admitted. "But I don't know how to leave. Not physically, financially." Lena's eyes narrowed. "You want out?" I nodded. "Then we build a firewall," she said. "From the inside out." "Lena, I'm not talking about hacking them. I'm talking about separating your digital spine from theirs. Right now, they're inside your infrastructure draining resources like parasites. First step, we air-gap your identity." I blinked. "You're enjoying this." "Of course I am. It's the most satisfying kind of digital breakup. No crying, no blocking, just pure, clean detachment." She leaned closer. "We're gonna call it Operation Unchained." I let out a laugh. A real one, sharp and unexpected. "I'm in." "All right," she said. "Let's audit the system. What are you attached to?" I pulled open my spreadsheet, read her line by line. "Okay," she said. "Step 1. Untangle what you don't legally own. That means anything you're paying for but don't have your name on. The mortgage whose name is on the loan, just Dad's." "Great. Then legally you're not tied. Cut the payment. Let him sort it out." My stomach turned. "If I do that," Lena said gently. "You already know what happens if you don't." I nodded. "Okay. Utilities. Are you the account holder?" "No, just the autopay card." "Easy. Pull it. They'll get warning notices. They're grown-ups, they'll figure it out." "What about the phones? Whose name on the plan?" "Mine." She winced. "That one's trickier. But you can reduce it to a base plan, port your number to a new provider and leave them on the old one. It'll force them to pay or lose service." I took notes like my life depended on it. In a way it did. "Bank accounts," she asked. "They don't have access to mine. But Mom has my old Venmo. And Dad still uses my Amazon account." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Emily." "I know. First thing tomorrow," she said. "New passwords. New 2FA. Change your address. Lock down your identity." My head spun. This feels aggressive. "It's self-defense," she said firmly. "Right now you're being robbed. Just because they're family doesn't make it less true." I went quiet. "You know I'm right," she added. I nodded slowly. "What if they freak out?" "They will. Prepare for panic, guilt, rage, the whole emotional circus. But they'll survive." I didn't reply. Then softly Lena asked, "Let me ask you something." "Okay. Are you living your life for you? Or for the version of you they've decided they're entitled to?" The question landed with a dull, aching thud. I looked around my room at the peeling posters from college. The chipped IKEA desk, the twin bed I never upgraded because there was always another payment due for someone else. "I don't know," I whispered. "I do," she said. "You're living for them. It's time to live for you." I blinked, tears stinging unexpectedly. "This isn't just money," she added. "It's identity. Autonomy. You've been conditioned to believe saying no is cruelty. But sometimes no is the kindest thing you can do for you and them." I sat with that. We stayed on the call another hour, mapping out a real plan. Lena sent me checklists, links to account management tools, even a secure password generator. By the time we hung up, I had an actionable roadmap. The firewall had been drafted. Operation Unchained was officially in motion. And for the first time in years, I felt something like power return to my body. Not rage, not rebellion, but control. Quiet, steady control. That night, I opened every account and changed every password. I removed payment methods, set up a new email, started the application for a P.O. box, I even searched for studio apartments in other cities just to know I had options. Then I wrote one sentence in the Notes app on my phone: I am allowed to keep what I earn. And I stared at it until the truth of it didn't feel selfish. It felt sacred. There's something sickly poetic about dismantling a machine you built with your own hands, especially when that machine was never meant to trap you, especially when it did anyway. It started just after midnight. I was sitting on the floor of my room, knees folded, hoodie pulled tight, lit only by the blue glow of my laptop screen. The house was asleep. Tyler had finally logged off his stream after 5 hours of yelling at strangers and rage quitting twice. Dad had passed out on the recliner with a whiskey tumbler still half full. Mom had taken her nightly melatonin with a glass of wine, whispering something about needing rest for the anxiety. I listened to the stillness, the hum of the fridge, the occasional floorboard creak. Then I clicked open the folder labeled Exit Op Unchained. Lena had helped me create it. Inside a checklist, 46 steps, each one a severed artery of dependence. I opened the first tab, Automatic Payments. My cursor hovered over the first line, Mortgage, $1, $917. Auto Draft Bank of the Lakes. Click. Cancel autopay. A warning popped up. Are you sure this will impact your scheduled payment? Yes. My finger hesitated a half second, then clicked. Gone. It was just a checkbox, a system, a transaction. But it felt like tearing down a monument. One payment didn't seem like much until you realized it was the root holding the whole tree upright. The mortgage was the spine of my family's illusion, that we were managing, that things were under control. But I was the one writing that story, one draft at a time, and now the edits had begun. Next, utilities. Electricity, water, gas, internet. Each one tied to my debit card, each one set to auto-renew. I opened the portal to the electric company. Password remembered. Of course I was the one who'd set it all up. Click, remove card. Please provide alternate payment method. I didn't. Next, window water, then gas, then Wi-Fi. Each screen a new wave of adrenaline. Every click was like a match to dry tinder. I could almost hear the future phone calls, the yelling, the confusion, and yet I didn't stop. I was shaking, but not from fear, from momentum, from finally putting my hands back on the wheel of my life. Next, streaming services. Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, Disney Plus, Spotify Family Plan. Dozens of logins I'd been paying for, even when I barely had time to watch a 20-minute show. I scrolled through the devices listed under my accounts. Tyler's PlayStation, Tyler's MacBook, Tyler's iPhone, Mom's iPad living room TV, Dad's Fire Stick, Dad's. I took a breath, then began the purge. Sign out of all devices. Revoke access. Cancel. 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 The notifications would come in the morning. Session expired. Unable to verify subscription. Please update payment method. I didn't care. If I waited for them to understand, I'd wait until I died. I paused, stretched my fingers. My back cracked. I'd been at it for an hour. Still more to go. I pulled up the Amazon account. This one stung. The profile photo was a picture Tyler had uploaded years ago, a cartoon version of our family with exaggerated eyes and 2 big smiles. There were 4 profiles: Emily, Mom, Dad, Tybo. I clicked into settings. Dad's car oil filter, Mom's essential oils, Tyler's gaming mouse, all charged to my Prime Visa, all without a single ask. I opened the payment settings, deleted my card, then removed the saved address, then locked the account. I changed the password to a random 32-character string enabled 2-factor and created a new account for myself under a different email. It was a digital eviction, and I felt both powerful and sick. I took a breath, checked the checklist. Banking access, shared apps transfers. I opened Venmo. My profile picture, a beach selfie from 5 years ago. I didn't even like the beach. Tyler had sent me 2 requests this week. $12 for Uber to Jen's, $38 for guild fees. I never approved them, but I also never declined. I clicked on privacy, switched everything to private, blocked both Mom and Tyler. It felt cold, which was the point. I opened my budgeting app. Mint. removed all linked accounts with shared logins, changed passwords, created a new email alias, and a separate tracking spreadsheet only I could access. Then I opened a blank document. I titled it Financial Firewall Established. Under it, I typed each step I had completed with timestamps. Evidence, receipts, protection, the final task of the night phone plan. This one took the longest. I'd opened the family plan back when I landed my job, thinking it'd be nice to lower everyone's bills. Back then, it had felt generous. Now it felt like shackles. I called the provider. It was nearly 1:00 a.m., but their virtual assistant transferred me to a rep in under 3 minutes. Hi, thanks for calling. Horizon Mobile. This is Alexis. How can I help you tonight? I swallowed. I need to separate my line from the existing family plan. Okay, sure. Is the account under your name? Yes, Emily Carter. Great. Let me verify your identity real quick. 5 minutes later, Alexis confirmed I could move my number to an individual plan and downgrade the others to basic service unless they added a new payment method within 7 days. Would you like us to notify them? No, I said. They'll figure it out. A pause. You're sure? I'm sure. I hung up. It was 1:23 a.m. I had been dismantling my own infrastructure for nearly 3 hours. I sat in the dark, the glow of the screen dimming to black as the battery hit 5%. I didn't cry when I pressed cancel. I didn't cry when I removed names. I didn't cry while clicking each "Are you sure?" prompt. I cried now. Not loud, not ugly. Just quiet, tired tears. The kind you cry when your body realizes the war is almost over. The kind that fall not from fear, but from the weight you've carried for too long. I wasn't turning my back on them. I was turning toward myself. And the difference was everything. The morning after I severed the financial umbilical cord, the house was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, uneasy quiet. Like the air itself knew something had changed. I'd barely slept. I lay awake most of the night, heart pounding like a metronome set to panic. But beneath the fear was something else, clarity. For the first time in years, my body wasn't coiled in anticipatory dread. It was still. Bracing, yes, but grounded. At 6:12 a.m., I slipped out of bed, careful not to let the floorboards creak. The hallway light was off. Dad's snoring rumbled faintly through the walls. Mom's door was shut. Tyler's headphones were still glowing under his door like some kind of gamer nightlight. Good. I had time. I'd packed the night before. 1 large duffel, 1 backpack, 1 locked file case of documents. I'd quietly collected passport, tax records, insurance papers, every piece of identity that still belonged to me. Everything else, the desk, the bookshelf, the smart TV I'd bought and never got to use, I left behind. Call it a tax on escape. I grabbed the bags, walked them down to the driveway in 2 trips. My car sat there like a co-conspirator, quiet and waiting. I'd filled the tank last night, programmed the GPS, turned off location sharing. When I stepped back inside for the last time, I took one long look at the hallway. The family portraits on the wall. All those smiling faces frozen in time, oblivious to what would follow. Then came the first sound of collapse. It started with a frustrated grunt. Dad's. He must have grabbed his phone. Must have tried to check his email or the news or maybe order something. Then the unmistakable bark. What the hell? I froze halfway up the stairs, duffel in hand. Another beat of silence. Then a chair scraping violently across the tile. Diane, he shouted. My phone isn't working. Says the plan's been changed. I didn't move. My hand tightened around the strap. Footsteps stormed across the house. Doors opening, slamming. Tyler. You get into the phone plan again. Wasn't me. Came a groggy voice from his room. Mine's down too. No signal. I heard the beeps of buttons being pushed. Failed calls. Confusion mounting. Then Mom's voice from the kitchen. Robert. My card just got declined for the pharmacy delivery. I thought I'm calling the company, Dad growled. No, I'm calling Emily. I backed away from the stairs as silent as breath. I didn't have long. Emily. He shouted, thunder in his voice. Get down here. I stepped into the foyer, heart punching against my ribs, and there he was, standing in the living room in pajama pants, his phone in one hand, the remote in the other like a weapon. His face was blotchy with rage. "What did you do?" I didn't answer. "Did you mess with the accounts?" Behind him, Mom entered, hair still curled from sleep confusion smeared across her face like a mask. "Emily," she said slower, less accusatory, but equally stunned. "The utilities, our internet's not working. Did you pay the bill?" I should have lied. Should have soothed it over with, "I'll fix it," or "must be a tech issue." Instead, I said, "It's not my responsibility anymore." Silence. Dead silence. Then Dad stepped forward. "What did you just say?" I didn't flinch. "I'm not paying for any of it. Not anymore." "You ungrateful little—" he began, then slammed his hand down on the kitchen counter. "You think you can just cut us off like that? After everything we've done for you?" "You mean everything I've done for you," I said quietly. Mom's face crumpled. "Sweetheart, you can't just leave us like this. There are bills." "I've left instructions," I said. "What's due, what needs to be updated." "There's a folder on the table." Tyler shuffled in shirtless, holding his phone like it betrayed him. "Yo, Netflix says our subscription expired. And my game accounts, did you what the hell, Emily?" Dad's face darkened. "This is how you pay us back." "You told me to get out," I said, still calm. "So I'm going." They all stood there stunned, as if I had just unplugged life support. "I packed last night," I added. "I didn't think you'd want a long goodbye." "You're making a mistake," Mom said, voice shaking. "I've already made one," I said, staying. Dad pointed at me. "You can't just walk away from this family." "I'm not walking away," I said. "I'm walking toward myself." And I turned, opened the door, took one step into the morning air. Behind me, Mom's voice cracked. "Please don't do this. We need you." I stopped at the threshold. For a brief second, my fingers clenched around the doorknob. She said, "We need you. Not we love you. Not we're sorry. Not thank you. Just we need you." And that's when I knew I had been a utility, not a daughter. I stepped outside. The air was sharp and honest, no perfume of guilt, just chill. I didn't look back. My car door clicked shut like punctuation. I started the engine. And as I pulled away from the house I'd funded but never been welcomed in, I didn't cry. Not yet. There was too much still ahead, but behind me through the windshield I saw it beginning. The unraveling. The inevitable reckoning. The chaos they'd never prepared for. Because until that morning I was the contingency plan, and now I was gone. The first breath I took in the new city felt wrong. Too clean, too light. It smelled like concrete after rain, eucalyptus trees, and roasted coffee from a cart somewhere nearby. But most of all, it smelled like nothing from my past. And that somehow felt disorienting. I stepped out of the car with my duffel bag slung over one shoulder file box in the other hand. My knees ached from the 4-hour drive. My brain was still catching up to the fact that I'd actually done it left. Not metaphorically. Not for a work trip. Not in a dream. Physically, completely, actually gone. Lena lived in a 1-bedroom walk-up nestled above a bookstore and a vegan sandwich shop in downtown Sacramento. The kind of place with chipped bricks and ivy vines crawling like green veins along the front windows. It smelled like aged paper and possibility. "You look like someone who just divorced 3 vampires at once," she said, swinging the door open. I managed a weak smile. "That's disturbingly accurate." She pulled me into a hug. A real one. No hesitation, no wait, just warmth. We didn't talk much that first hour. I dropped my stuff near the couch. She pointed me toward the shower. I stood under the hot water longer than was reasonable, trying to scrub off the invisible film of other people's expectations, of years of resentment and breathless giving. When I came out, she had food on the table, falafel wraps and lemon water. No fanfare, no pressure, just space. "I don't know where to start," I said, finally unwrapping the food like it might detonate. "Don't," she replied. "Start later. For now, eat." And I did. Every bite felt like medicine, like reclaiming something as simple as hunger for myself. That night, I lay on the pull-out couch, arms crossed behind my head, staring up at a ceiling that didn't hold memories. No birthday fights, no screamed accusations, no guilt baked into the drywall, just stillness. Outside the sliding door, Lena's tiny balcony overlooked a narrow street where people still moved like the world hadn't stopped. A couple laughed as they passed below. A bus hissed to a halt. A dog barked from the alley. Life, uninterrupted. I got up barefoot, wrapped a throw around my shoulders, and stepped outside. The city lights made the sky glow a dusty amber. It was the kind of quiet that didn't feel oppressive, the kind that waited for you to speak but didn't demand it. I opened my laptop. The screen felt too bright. The cursor blinked like an impatient friend tapping its foot. New tab, new document, new chapter. I stared at the empty field of white for a long time. Then, without quite realizing it, I started to type, "How to escape the role of the family ATM." I stared at the words for a moment. They looked stark, brutal, almost cruel, but they were true. I let the phrase hang there while I took a sip of water, the cold bite grounding me. Then I typed again. Step 1, realize they're never going to stop asking. The sentence hit like a slap, not to the reader, to me, because I knew it was the truth. I'd spent years hoping someone else in the house would rise up and say, "You've done enough." I had waited for gratitude to turn into action, for empathy to morph into contribution, but it never had. Because entitlement doesn't see generosity, it sees supply. I kept writing, not fast, not polished, just honest. Stories spilled out like small confessions. The time Dad asked me to pay for his golf membership just until the next paycheck, then never looked for work. The day Mom cried because I couldn't cover her massage therapy appointment, while my own car sat in the shop waiting for a part I couldn't afford. Tyler's constant belief that his content would blow up next month, always next month, never now, never real. Line by line, I poured the memories out like infected water from a wound. No edits, no euphemisms. It wasn't revenge. It was release. Halfway through, I paused and reread the title. My finger hovered over the backspace key. Maybe I should make it softer, more palatable, more click-friendly. But no, this wasn't for them. It wasn't for followers. It was for me. And I was done shrinking my language to protect people who never once cushioned theirs. I saved the draft, titled the folder Freedom Drafts. Then I closed the laptop. A cool breeze slipped between the balcony rails, brushing against my skin like a reminder. This is real. This is yours. The city hadn't exploded. My phone hadn't rung. The world had not collapsed because I wasn't financially puppeteering 3 grown adults. The silence was terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time, I considered what it would mean to live a life where my choices didn't orbit around someone else's negligence. What it would feel like to go on a vacation I didn't need to justify. To buy furniture that didn't feel like betrayal. To rest, not recover, not survive, but rest. The idea of enough stopped feeling like a finish line. It started feeling like a boundary. Inside, Lena was already asleep. Her apartment felt like another world, one that functioned without debt, threats, overdraft notices, or strategic silence after awkward money conversations. It was strange and good. I didn't know what tomorrow would look like. There were logistics to sort out, credit damage, to navigate a lease, to consider maybe even a job transfer down the line. But tonight was a bridge, from captivity to autonomy, from guilt to clarity, from surviving to choosing. And as I sat beneath the soft whir of the ceiling fan, the stars buried behind city haze, I whispered something aloud just to see how it felt on my tongue. I deserve peace. The words didn't echo, but they didn't disappear either. They settled on my shoulders like armor, not heavy, just right. The first blow didn't come with a phone call or a voicemail. It came by certified mail, a thick envelope stamped and official delivered to Lena's apartment 3 days after I moved in. She handed it to me at the door, brow furrowed. "You expecting something from Mitchell and Harding Legal Associates?" I stared at the return address, Dad's City. Not a law firm I recognized. My fingers trembled as I peeled the seal open. Inside, a 4-page letter typed double-spaced, wrapped in righteous indignation. Financial abandonment. Unlawful account. Manipulation. Breach of familial responsibility. I read it once, then again, slower. The letter alleged that I had willfully disrupted the household financial ecosystem, caused emotional distress, and might be held liable for any financial fallout resulting from my decision to remove myself from shared obligations. It was full of legal-sounding phrases peppered with vague threats. But when I flipped to the final page, there was no court date, no case number. Just Dad's signature at the bottom, written in the same sharp slant he used when signing permission slips in high school. I snorted. It was a bluff, an attempt to intimidate. But it still lodged something deep in my chest. An old wound Dad knew exactly how to strike that no matter how independent I became, he could still scare me with the illusion of power. Lena took the letter and read it, lips pursed. "This isn't a real legal threat," she said. "It's a tantrum in Times New Roman." "I know," I whispered, "but it still shakes something loose." 2 days later, I found out he wasn't done. I woke to 10 missed calls and 3 frantic emails from my company's HR department. Subject urgent. Character reference dispute. Someone had emailed my employer's general inquiry inbox claiming to be concerned about the ethics of one of their senior engineers. The message included a fake story about me using company funds to support a gambling habit, referencing a fabricated incident involving stolen passwords and a family conflict gone wrong. Attached was a screenshot of a post. Tyler. I knew the username. His alt account, one he used for trolling people on Reddit and writing anonymous Twitter hot takes about freeloading feminists. He'd posted a long thread painting me as manipulative, vindictive, and mentally unstable, framing my exit from the family as abandonment of disabled and dependent relatives. The hashtags were worse. Hashtag family abuser, our selfish daughter, our freeloader, masking as martyr. I sat frozen in front of the screen, bile rising in my throat. It wasn't just embarrassing. It was personal. Designed to destroy the one thing I had left untouched, my professional identity. I barely noticed Lena stepping behind me until she placed a hand on my shoulder. "You need to talk to someone," she said. "Like someone professional." But first I had to talk to my job. At 9:01 a.m., I walked into a Zoom call with HR and my manager, heart racing. I expected suspicion. Cold neutrality, that polite corporate tone people use when they've already decided to let you go. But instead I found Heather, my direct supervisor, furious on my behalf. "I've already flagged the email as harassment," she said. "We're documenting everything. You've been nothing but professional since day one, and this isn't going to touch your standing here." My throat tightened. "Thank you," I managed. "If you're open to it," she added. "We'll connect you with legal support through our employee assistance plan, just to make sure you're protected in case they escalate." I nodded. "Yes, please." After the call, I stepped out onto the balcony, heart still pounding. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that they were willing to burn my entire life down just because I stopped financing theirs. This wasn't confusion. This was warfare. That afternoon, I took Lena's advice and called the attorney recommended by HR, a soft-spoken woman named Marissa Keys, who specialized in family-related financial disputes and digital harassment. We met via video, and within 10 minutes I knew I was in capable hands. "This kind of escalation isn't uncommon," she explained. "You took away the resource, so now they're attacking your reputation, trying to force you back into the role through public shame and fear." "They can't actually sue me, can they?" I asked. She smiled a little wry. "They can file paperwork, sure. Anyone can. But you haven't broken a single law. You were paying voluntarily with no written agreement. You were not a legal co-signer on the mortgage. And everything you removed was within your rights." I exhaled. "So what do? "We preempt," she said. "We send a cease and desist to both your father and brother, formally documenting their harassment. We flag the defamation report, the social posts, and prepare a statement in case your employer needs further support. And if they push again, we escalate. And if they show up, I'll get you a no-contact order," she said. "They want you to be scared. We make it clear they should be." It was the first time I felt someone use the word "we" in a way that didn't include conditions. That night I opened my blog draft again. I added a new section. Step 2. Expect the backlash. People who relied on your silence will scream the loudest when you speak. Then beneath it, And scream louder when you act. I clicked save. Somewhere out there, Dad was probably pacing a kitchen I paid for, cursing my name. Tyler was likely refreshing his feed, waiting for likes, convinced he was justified in his digital smear campaign. But I wasn't pacing anymore. I had a legal team. I had a friend with strong Wi-Fi and stronger wine. I had my job. I had my voice. And most importantly, I had boundaries with teeth. There's a specific kind of betrayal that doesn't punch you in the gut. It slides in like a whisper, calm and precise, and guts you from the inside out. I found it on a Tuesday. It started innocently enough. Marissa, my lawyer, had recommended I do a complete financial audit of my personal history. You've already removed yourself from the present system, she'd said. Now it's time to understand what that system really was. I thought I already knew. I thought I'd seen the full scope of it, the unpaid bills, the dependencies, the emotional leash disguised as family obligation. But I hadn't, not even close. I was going through old emails, digging for any documents I might have forgotten, when I stumbled on one labeled simply Carter Household Portfolio Review, sent to my dad, from a private investment firm. My stomach twisted. I opened it. The email was brief, professional. It thanked Robert Carter for his continued loyalty and confirmed that the family's long-term investment portfolio was performing above projection, now sitting at $163,000 across 3 brokerage accounts. Attached was a PDF of holdings, mutual funds, municipal bonds, and a small but healthy index fund. Date sent October 8th, less than 2 months before my birthday. Less than 2 months before he told me I was a burden and demanded I leave. I clicked through the attachments in disbelief. Every figure screamed in bold. Every dividend payout glared like an accusation. And then I saw it, in the memo section of the portfolio. Recommend shifting 5% into international holdings after client request to remain conservative until daughter's wedding is financed. I froze. My wedding. I wasn't even dating anyone at the time. But apparently they'd been planning how they might finance an event I'd likely end up paying for myself. I stared at the screen, numb. Then I checked the sender address. It matched a domain tied to a boutique firm based in our city, Wellsford capital. I called the number listed using 67 to mask my identity. A receptionist answered. Wellsford Capital. How can I assist you? Yes, I'm calling to confirm account details on behalf of Robert Carter. He's asked me to gather documentation for estate planning. Can you verify the last statement date for me? Certainly, she replied. Can I ask your name? Emily Carter, his daughter. 1 second of silence. Then, yes, I have the Carter file here. The last quarterly report was generated January 3rd. Would you like me to resend it to Mr. Carter's email or forward a copy to yours as well? No need. That's all I needed. Thank you. I hung up before she could say more. Quarterly report, as in ongoing, as in current. I sat frozen at the edge of Lena's kitchen counter. Lena stepped out of her room in leggings and a sleep shirt, holding a mug of tea. You look like you saw a ghost. I think I found their money, I said. She raised an eyebrow. What? They're not broke, I said, voice flat. They're not even struggling. They've got investments, accounts, a portfolio. They've been sitting on it this whole time. Lena slowly set her mug down. How long have they had it? Years. At least 4. That's just what I found. She leaned forward. Emily, you've been paying everything. I know. No, she said, shaking her head. You've given up everything, and they've been letting you, while stockpiling money like a backup escape hatch. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My brain felt like static. My entire internal defense for them had always been, they're desperate. They don't know better. They're just scared. But desperation doesn't come with a diversified portfolio. Fear doesn't generate a 6% annual return. This wasn't poverty. It was strategy. They weren't stuck. They just didn't want to move. I opened my own banking app. My checking account had just over $2,800. My savings barely cleared $5. My retirement account, built painstakingly over the last 5 years, hovered just below $11,000. I was the one scraping, stretching, sacrificing. They'd been holding chips behind their back the whole game. And worse, they watched me bleed for them. Every overdraft fee, every canceled plan, Every exhausted late-night shift where I took on extra freelance work to afford a house I didn't own to feed mouths that weren't hungry to keep the lights on for people who could have paid the bill themselves. They let me do it, worse they expected me to, because I made it easy, because I never asked questions, because I trusted them. Lena sat beside me and said nothing for a long time. Then softly, "What are you going to do?" I looked down at my hands, shaking clenched, but not helpless. "Nothing," I said. For now. That night I didn't cry. I journaled. I wrote every memory I could recall where they told me money was tight. The Christmas where they asked me to cancel my trip so we could keep the lights on. The time Mom said she couldn't afford a root canal while buying a $400 juicer. The way Dad shamed me for suggesting we sell the second car. The night Tyler asked me for gas money because he couldn't bear to ask Dad for help. Each one sat on the page like a splinter working its way out of my skin. It didn't matter that they hadn't broken laws. What they broke was trust. They weaponized my compassion, taught me that love means silent sacrifice and shutting up when the math doesn't add up. Not anymore. That night I added a new section to my blog. Step 3. Audit the narrative. Follow the money. The story you've been told might not be the truth. Underneath I wrote, "You're not cruel for asking where your help went. You're not selfish for expecting transparency. People don't get to demand loyalty while hiding secrets behind your back." Then I hit save, not publish. Not yet. The story wasn't over, but the illusion, that ended the moment I realized they weren't drowning. They just didn't feel like swimming, because I was the one keeping them afloat. The first therapy session was awkward, not because the therapist wasn't kind, she was. Dr. Elaine March had soft eyes, a no-nonsense voice, and the kind of calm presence that made silence feel like an invitation instead of a punishment. But sitting across from her on a gray couch in a minimalist office on the 3rd floor of a wellness clinic, I realized something terrifying. I didn't know how to talk about myself unless it involved someone else's needs. So she began, "What brings you here?" I opened my mouth and froze. What did bring me here? The email threats. The betrayal. The quiet. The terrifying freedom. I walked away, I said. From my family. From a role I didn't know I was playing. And now I don't know what to do with myself. She nodded once slowly. "That's a good place to begin." And just like that, a door cracked open. Over the next few weeks, I returned to that office every Thursday at 6:00 p.m., rain or shine. I started calling it my non-negotiable appointment, even though no one else really asked where I was going. I think I needed to say it aloud to protect the 1 hour a week that was finally truly only for me. We talked about boundaries, the kind that go beyond saying no, the kind that start in the mind, the kind that say, "You are not required to ruin yourself for people who refuse to save themselves." We unpacked the guilt, the shame, the years of internalized pressure to be the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who never lets the house fall apart. "You've been over-functioning for a family system that learned to underfunction in your shadow," she said once. I wrote that down. It hit too hard not to. Meanwhile, life outside therapy was shifting in small but seismic ways. I was still staying with Lena, still working remotely while sorting out longer-term plans. But I was sleeping better, eating better, thinking in straight lines again. And then one morning I got the email. Subject, personal finance, storytelling panel. Guest speaker, invitation. It came from the organizer of an upcoming conference on financial independence and behavioral money patterns. Apparently, someone at my company had anonymously submitted my blog draft, which I hadn't even published yet, to a private circle of women in tech, and someone else had read it. They wanted me to speak. Not just as a cautionary tale, but as a lived example of disentangling identity from inherited obligation. I read the message 3 times, blinking. Lena walked in, coffee in hand, just as I was rereading it a 4th time. "You okay?" I looked up. "I think someone wants me to speak at a finance conference." She grinned. "You mean they want to listen to you?" "I'm not an expert. Emily. She said you survived a 4-year-long financial hostage situation and built your own escape tunnel with spreadsheets and resolve. If that's not expertise, I don't know what is." I hesitated. Something in me recoiled, not out of fear, but doubt. Who was I without my shame? Who was I when I wasn't quietly carrying everyone else's weight? You don't have to say yes, Lena said gently. But maybe you should ask why you want to say no. That night I said yes. I told them I'd be honored. The panel was 3 weeks away. Just enough time to prepare a speech and not enough time to back out. I started rehearsing in front of the mirror. I talked about emotional labor, about inherited responsibility, about the invisible contracts so many daughters sign without realizing the terms include everything you are for everything they need. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And yet in the background of this blooming clarity, the phone calls kept coming. Mom. 27 missed calls in the last 5 days. 46 voicemails. 92 texts. Some of them split into multiple messages because she didn't know how to thread them. They ranged from tearful to angry to pleading. Emily, just call me. I'm scared. Your father says we're ruined. You've changed. We didn't raise you like this. You were our rock. Please don't abandon us. You'll regret this one day. I forgive you. Come home. It would have been easier if she'd just said nothing. But guilt is the most manipulative silence breaker there is. I let the calls go unanswered. I didn't block her. I didn't rage. I just didn't go back. Dr. March helped me find language for it. You're not abandoning her, she said. You're refusing to walk back into a burning house just because someone you love is still standing inside refusing to see the flames. I nodded. But sometimes at night, I still stared at the screen, her name glowing like an ember I couldn't stomp out. Could I trust her again? Could I trust anyone? That question lingered more than I cared to admit. I second-guessed every kindness now. Wondered if there was a price tag behind every compliment. If the next hand extended to me would curl into a fist if I ever stopped giving. Even Lena, despite everything, sometimes made me flinch when she offered too much. You need groceries, she'd ask. And my first instinct was always, what do you want from me? Healing. I was learning wasn't linear. It was full of these little betrayals I did to myself. Mistrust handed out freely. Vulnerability kept in a locked vault. But slowly I was prying the hinges open. One therapy session at a time. One rejected guilt trip at a time. One honest, unedited speech at a time. I still didn't know what kind of daughter I was becoming. But I knew what I was no longer. An open wallet with no password. A yes woman with no opinion. A shield with no armor. And that was a start. The chaos began with a scream. Not the kind of startled shriek you hear when someone drops a coffee or spills files. No, this one was raw, guttural, and unmistakably familiar. I was 2 floors up in the quiet corner of the engineering wing, half listening to a call about UI latency, when the Slack messages started lighting up. Is someone's dad screaming in the lobby? Security's involved. Should we be worried, Emily, is that... Your father? My heart fell straight through the floor. I yanked my earbuds out and stood every nerve in my body firing at once. The building was sleek and open concept. The lobby stretched 3 stories high, glass everywhere. When I reached the balcony railing, I could see the scene unfold like a slow-motion train wreck. There he was, Robert Carter, my father. Gray hair, mussed shirt, half-untucked face, red with fury. His voice echoed through the atrium as he waved papers and shouted at the receptionist who had retreated behind the desk like a frightened animal. "I want to speak to her," he bellowed. "She stole from us, from her family." He looked deranged, like a man unmoored from reality. No control, no shame, just pure rage. I stood frozen above it all, watching him like an out-of-body experience. Below, 2 security guards approached, one older, stockier, calm but firm. The other young, nervous. They tried to reason with him, arms out, non-confrontational posture. "Sir, you need to step back. This is a private office building." "I'm her father," he growled. "I have every right to be here. She's my blood. She owes us." The word owes echoed, bouncing off the marble floor and glass walls. Owes, like I was a debt. A credit card that stopped swiping. A machine that dared to turn off. One of the managers from HR, Juliet, rushed into the lobby, clipboard in hand, speaking quickly to the gods, eyes wide. "Mr. Carter," she said, voice raised but steady. "You are trespassing. You need to leave now, or we will call the police." "She stole our money," he shouted, stabbing his finger toward the ceiling. "She destroyed her mother. She's a liar, a thief." People had gathered along the upper levels. Engineers, designers, interns. Some with phones half raised, not sure whether to record or run. And me, I just stood there, watching, unmoving, until he looked up. Somehow he sensed exactly where I was. His eyes locked onto mine like heat-seeking missiles. And for a second, everything else disappeared. The building, the noise, the emails, the weeks of therapy, the years of sacrifice. It was just me and him, father and daughter, battleground and escapee. "Emily," he roared. "Get down here, look at me!" I didn't move. He took a step forward toward the elevator, but the older security guard stepped in and placed a hand on his chest. "That's enough," the guard said. "You're leaving." "I raised her," he shouted in the man's face. "I paid for her life." The second guard reached for his radio, but Juliet already had hers out. "Call SFPD," she said quietly. "Now." That was when the first punch came, not physical but emotional, because even as the guards guided him toward the door, even as he shouted, struggled, kicked the base of the reception desk in a last act of impotent defiance, I realized something that buckled my knees. He wasn't here for justice. He was here to make a scene, to drag me back into the pit with him, because public shame was his last weapon. But I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just watched. And as they pushed the glass doors open and forced him outside, I whispered to myself, not loud, but enough to anchor my breath. I already paid. The words floated beneath my tongue like a secret spell. I paid with my 20s, my sleep, my credit, my silence. The guards lingered at the door until the police arrived, a cruiser pulling up quietly at the curb. I didn't watch him get arrested. I didn't need to. The damage was done, or maybe finally undone. Back upstairs, the tension cracked. Co-workers whispered. One handed me a cup of water. Juliet found me and touched my arm. "You don't have to explain anything," she said gently. "We're with you." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Thank you." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emails blurred. Code became meaningless. But one thing remained clear. He came to humiliate me. He left humiliated. That night I sat on the balcony again, laptop open. I pulled up my blog draft. New post. Title What We Owe and What We Survive. And I began to write. Not about money, not about boundaries, but about dignity, about what it means to finally choose yourself, and how freedom isn't always quiet. Sometimes it screams your name in a lobby, and you just have to let it echo and keep walking. It happened quietly. No headlines, no announcements. Just a series of whispers that reached me through Lena's window one gray afternoon, as the clouds pressed heavy against the sky. 2 months after the incident at the office, the collapse began. I heard about the foreclosure through a friend who still lived in my hometown. The bank had repossessed the house. Not because of some sudden tragedy, but because Dad never adjusted. The utilities hadn't been paid in weeks. The mortgage went ignored. Late notices stacked until the mailbox was stuffed shut. There was a photo online, a blurry shot of movers loading couches and garbage bags into a van. My old bookshelf, the one I built during my first software internship, stood crooked on the front lawn like a tombstone. Gone. Just like that. The same house they told me wasn't mine to claim. The same living room where my birthday ended in silence and shame. The kitchen where I wasn't allowed to complain. The hallway lined with portraits I paid to frame. Erased. Tyler. My brother had started working construction. I saw it on his social feed, buried beneath a meme and a caption that read, "New era, no handouts." I didn't like it, didn't comment, but I stared at it longer than I should have. Then one Thursday it came. A letter, not digital, not an email or a text or a voicemail drowned in tears. A real letter, handwritten in blue ink on soft paper with pressed edges. It arrived in an envelope with no return address, forwarded from my company's mailing office. I didn't open it right away. just stared at it for hours while rain threatened to break against the sky outside my window. The handwriting was familiar, slanted too neat, the way Mom used to label my lunch containers when I was in grade school. Emily, do not trade. At 5:42 p.m. the rain started, a slow tap against the glass. I stepped outside with the envelope in hand onto the small apartment balcony. The sky cracked open. No thunder, just water falling like it couldn't hold back anymore. I sat on a metal chair, fingers trembling, and opened it. The paper was already damp before I unfolded it. My mother's voice lived in those lines, every curve of ink carrying years I had tried to unremember. Emily, I don't expect you to read this, and I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know the truth even if it's too late. We failed you. We didn't mean to. That doesn't make it better, but it's the truth. Your father, he was too proud to admit he needed you. I was too afraid to stand up to him. And Tyler, well, we all let him believe the world owed him something. You became our lifeline. And instead of gratitude, we gave you guilt. We called it love, but it wasn't. It was need dressed in tradition. When you left, everything crumbled. The house is gone. The money's gone. I've taken a job cleaning offices at night. It's the first real work I've done in years. Your father doesn't speak much. He's angry mostly at himself, though he'd never admit it. Tyler is trying. That's all I can say. I want you to know I remember every time you asked for help. Every time we dismissed you. I replay those moments in my head like punishment. I am sorry. You gave us everything and we mistook it for entitlement. That's on us. I hope maybe someday we can talk. Not as parents and child, not as givers and takers, but as people. Flawed and hurting, but honest. I understand if that day never comes, but I needed you to know I see you now. Mom, my breath hitched halfway through. By the time I reached the bottom, the paper had blurred. Not from the rain. From the tears, I didn't know I was still capable of crying. There were no justifications, no hidden barbs. No, but we had no choice. Just her, laid bare in ink. For a moment, I didn't know what to feel. Relief, anger, grief. It all collided at once. Years of silent sacrifice. Sleepless nights. Bank transfers made with trembling hands, whispered self-doubt in bathroom mirrors. And beneath it a child still waiting for someone to say, "We were wrong." She had said it, too late to fix the past, but maybe not too late to face it. I stayed on the balcony long after the rain slowed letter limp in my hands. I didn't know if I could forgive her. Not fully, not yet. But the wall in my chest, the one that kept the rage warm and breathing, started to crack. Just a little. And in that tiny breach, something unexpected slipped through, a sliver of peace, because now finally someone saw me. Not for what I gave, not for what I earned, but for who I was when I said no. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin again. Not as family, but as survivors of a shared silence. I folded the letter carefully, pressed it into a journal I hadn't touched in weeks, and stood. The rain had stopped. The city lights glimmered through the mist, refracted like stars beneath water. I closed my eyes and whispered not to her, not to them, but to the girl I had been. You didn't deserve what happened to you. But look at what you built anyway. And that was something no one could ever take back. The living room hadn't changed. Same beige carpet. Same outdated curtains clinging to sun-stained windows. Same stale air as if it had held its breath since the day I left. But the people in it, they weren't the same. Neither was I. We sat in a circle of folding chairs and frayed cushions. My mother, pale and quiet, clutched a box of tissues like a lifeline. Tyler sat stiff in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, his gaze fixed on the floor. Aunt Clarice and Uncle Jim flanked them, invited as neutral witnesses, or maybe just emotional referees. Their presence didn't calm the air, but it grounded it. And then there was my father, standing apart from us all, arms crossed tightly over his chest like body armor. He hadn't said a word since I walked through the door. I hadn't either, but now it was time. I stood, pulled my laptop from the satchel, and connected it to the TV in the corner. The screen blinked to life. A spreadsheet opened. Silence thickened. This, I said calmly, is what 4 years looks like. No preamble, no small talk, no apologies for making things uncomfortable. Because it was uncomfortable. I clicked the first tab. Year 1, 2019. The numbers were precise. Rent, groceries, utilities. Credit card minimums I'd paid when they maxed out. Surprise car repairs. Medical bills Mom said insurance wouldn't cover. Every row came with a receipt, a date, a line item of emotional blackmail veiled as obligation. I tracked everything. I continued. At first because I'm meticulous, then because I had to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Click. Year 2, 2020. Bigger numbers. Pandemic adjustments. Tyler's new gaming setup listed under miscellaneous. A $3,000 PayPal transfer labeled emergency that went to Dad's online gambling account. The room tensed. Click. Year 3, 2021. The year the house got unexpected plumbing issues. Except the plumber's invoice was forged. I found the real one in my emails, half the cost. Where had the rest gone? Nobody answered. Click. Year 4, 2022. The final total filled the screen. $239,712.34. I let it sit there. No one spoke. No one moved. Mom sobbed once. A sharp, involuntary sound that cracked the stillness like a falling plate. I was 25 when this started, I said, voice low. I thought helping meant saving. I thought being a good daughter meant being available, useful, quiet. My eyes met Tyler's. You once told me you'd pay me back when your channel blew up. He winced. It never did. I turned to Mom. You said it was just a rough patch, that Dad needed time to recover, that you were too anxious to work. She shook her head slowly, tears slipping down both cheeks. I didn't know what else to do. You did know, I said, not harsh but firm. You just didn't want to live differently. And then my voice broke. Just a fraction. You let me drain myself, and every time I tried to stop you made me feel like the villain. Aunt Clarice cleared her throat. Emily, sweetheart, maybe we can... No, I said. Let me finish. I turned to my father. He didn't look at me, didn't blink, just stared at the numbers on the screen like they were foreign characters. You told me I didn't belong in that house, that I could leave if I didn't like the rules. I walked toward him slowly. But here's what you don't get. I was never asking to belong. I was asking to matter. He didn't flinch, but he also didn't stay. He turned, walked out the front door without a word, the screen door slamming shut behind him. No one chased him. No one asked him to. Inside, Mom folded in on herself. The letter she'd written me felt 1,000 years old now. This was real. Raw. The part she couldn't write. I didn't know it would go that far, she whispered. I thought it was love. That if we stuck together, it would all even out. It didn't, I said. I know, she said, voice cracking. I know now. The room dissolved into quiet tears. No angry shouting, no accusations hurled like knives. Just silence. The kind that follows truth when there's nothing left to shield it. Eventually, I closed the laptop. Uncle Jim exhaled through his nose and shook his head. Jesus, Emily. You held them up longer than anyone could have expected. I held myself down in the process, I replied. Clarice nodded. And you're right to walk away. But I hope one day you can sit in a room like this and not carry so much weight. I didn't answer, because I didn't know yet. Not if forgiveness meant forgetting. Not if understanding meant re-entering the same house that had let me bleed dry in silence. But I had shown up. I had spoken. I had laid it bare. And sometimes that's all the closure the soul gets. The meeting ended not with hugs or resolutions, but with tired glances, damp tissues, and the soft scrape of chairs against worn carpet. As I stepped outside into the late afternoon air, the sun breaking through gray, I felt lighter. Not because anything was fixed, but because the weight wasn't mine anymore. I'd given it back row by row, number by number, truth by truth. And what they did with it now, that was their burden to carry. The apartment was nothing special. 1 bedroom. Light brown carpet. A balcony just big enough for a single folding chair. The walls echoed when I walked through them the first time, bare and a little lonely. But it was mine. No one else's name was on the lease. No whispered threats that it wasn't really my home. No weight of expectations hanging in the air. Just me, a set of keys, and the breathless quiet of something beginning. I moved in on a Saturday morning with nothing but 2 suitcases, a second-hand couch, and an IKEA desk Lena helped me assemble. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like a revolution. I slept on the floor the first night. No mattress yet. Just a pillow, 2 blankets, and the gentle hum of a space untouched by obligation. For the first time in years, I wasn't working to hold someone else up. I was building something beneath my own feet. Brick by brick, slow, uneven, but real. Within 3 weeks, I'd set up my new budget. I opened a high-yield savings account. I automated 10% of every paycheck into an investment app with low-fee index funds. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. I didn't just want stability. I wanted sovereignty. My credit score was still recovering. My savings were modest, but every line item in that spreadsheet was mine, earned, owned, and protected. Freedom had always sounded like some grand, untouchable concept, a word tossed around by people selling online courses and minimalist fantasies. But for me it looked like this, knowing exactly where every dollar went and none of it disappearing into someone else's silence. It also looked like this, a microphone, a new tab on my laptop labeled podcast drafts. The idea had been floating in my head for months. Lena kept pushing me. You don't have to be perfect. Just be honest. That's what people need. So I did it. Episode 1, title ATM Daughter No More. I recorded it in my closet with a $39 USB mic and a laptop stacked on shoeboxes. I talked about the years I spent believing love was a transaction, about how guilt masqueraded as duty, about waking up one day and realizing I didn't know what I wanted because I'd only ever been told what was needed, and I didn't sugarcoat the aftermath. I didn't walk away empowered. I said into the silence. I walked away hollow, angry, tired, but I walked. And that was enough to start. I hit upload with shaking fingers. Didn't tell anyone. Just waited. A week later, someone DM'd me on Instagram, a nurse in Oregon. She'd found the podcast on accident. Binge listened to all 3 posted episodes. You said what I've been scared to say out loud, she wrote. Thank you. By the end of the month, I had 100 followers. Then 500. Then 2,000. Mostly women. Mostly silent fighters whispering their gratitude between shift breaks and school pickups. I named the show Freedom Ledger, a place for stories about reclaiming financial autonomy, emotional sovereignty, and the power of a well-placed no. It wasn't viral, but it was real, and real was enough. Back in the family orbit, things weren't fixed, but they were shifting. Tyler texted once a week now. Short messages, sometimes just memes, sometimes questions. Is Roth IRA better than regular 401k? Asking for me this time, LOL. I didn't always answer, but I didn't delete them either. Mom sent postcards, always with pictures of flowers. Once a photo of a beach we visited when I was 10. She never asked for money again. Never asked for anything, really. Just wrote, thinking of you and sometimes hope you're still dancing even when it's hard. We weren't reconciled. We were slowly recalibrating. Even Dad, stubborn, angry, unreachable, had started working again. Part-time at a hardware store, according to Clarice. He didn't talk to me, but he didn't talk about me either. And that in its own way felt like progress. I didn't send money, but I did send a book once. Boundaries, When to Say Yes, How to Say No. No note, no return address. Just mailed it with hope and a tracking number. Whether he read it or burned it, I'll never know. And that's okay. This chapter wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, learning to trust my own decisions. Learning that security doesn't come from having enough to give it, comes from knowing you're allowed to keep. Learning to love the version of me who made mistakes, who stayed too long, who tried too hard, and who finally left. Some nights I sat on that tiny balcony mic in my lap talking into the dusk. I used to think survival was the end goal, I told my listeners. But now I think it's the floor, the foundation, what you build on top of it that's freedom. And I meant it. I still had moments of doubt, flashes of guilt, late-night dreams where I was back in that house, that kitchen, that trap disguised as love. But I also had a calendar filled with reminders of therapy appointments, a fridge covered in affirmations, a bank account that didn't scream empty. and a voice stronger, steadier, that no longer needed permission to speak. This was my rebuild. Messy, imperfect, glorious. The studio lights were brighter than she expected. Emily stood behind the velvet curtain mic, clipped discreetly to her collarbone palms, slightly damp. The producer gave her the countdown fingers in the calm voice in her earpiece. 3, 2, 1. The host's voice rolled out across the airwaves, smooth and familiar. Welcome back to Real Voices, where today's story isn't just about breaking free, it's about rewriting your value from the ground up. Our next guest is the voice behind the popular podcast Freedom Ledger and a recent advocate for financial justice and emotional healing. Please welcome Emily Carter. The curtain opened. Applause. She stepped forward. No trembling this time. No breath held hostage by fear. Just steady steps onto a set built to hear her voice finally. The host smiled warmly. Emily, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me, she said, settling into the chair. The segment was 15 minutes, but it felt like a heartbeat and a lifetime. They spoke of the spreadsheet, the silence, the confrontations, the podcast, the beginning. But when the host asked, "What was the moment everything changed for you?" Emily paused. Not dramatically, but truthfully. She glanced briefly at the camera. Somewhere maybe her mother was watching. Maybe Tyler. Maybe 100 women like her sitting in dark kitchens wondering if they were wrong to want out. I think, she said slowly, the moment everything changed wasn't when I walked away. It was when I realized I didn't need to ask permission to stay gone. A hush settled over the audience. She continued, "We're taught that family is forever, that forgiveness is required. But what I learned is that freedom doesn't always come from escape. Sometimes it comes from closure, from knowing the door's locked not out of cruelty, but because you finally understand your worth." The host nodded, eyes glistening. Emily smiled, not politely, but with the quiet, earned power of someone who had walked through fire and rebuilt her skin from smoke. When the show ended, she walked out into the twilight of the city. Cameras behind her, city noise swelling around her, the air crisp with late spring. And there it was, the apartment, her apartment, not just leased but now officially hers. 12 months of on-time payments credit rebuilt, and a modest but firm down payment. Later she'd secured the deed. The closing papers sat folded in her tote bag beside her water bottle and a worn copy of her therapy journal. In her palm a key, not a metaphor, not a symbol. A real cool-to-the-touch silver key with a green plastic tag that read Unit 3B. She turned it between her fingers as she climbed the stairs, pausing at the landing. The door loomed ahead. Her space, her rules, her sanctuary. A year ago she was unraveling. Hunted by guilt, haunted by voices that told her freedom was selfish. That she owed herself to people who never once asked who she wanted to become. Now she had a door no one else could unlock. She held the key up to the sky, playfully then purposefully, and whispered to herself with a smile breaking open across her face, "Freedom isn't leaving. Freedom is never having to go back the same way again." The key slipped into the lock, a quiet click, and the door opened to light.